Good evening. Tonight on Talk With, we talk with Dr. SODY MUNSAKA, who is the Acting Dean of School of Health Sciences at the University of Zambia, and he is a biomedical specialist in virology and immunology. My name is KAMOTA MAYONDI. You are watching live TV on channel 112 on your Top Star decoder, and this is Talk With. Tonight on Talk With, we talk about COVID-19 and the surge in related deaths. Good evening, Dr. MUNSAKA.
Good evening, Kamota, and good evening, our viewers.
Yes, it's lovely to have you in the studio to talk about COVID-19 with us. And so just getting into our conversation, so studies have shown that the large majority of coronavirus infections do not result in symptoms, and figures from China indicate that about 80% of the cases are asymptomatic, and given that testing has been quite limited. Bringing the conversation home to Zambia, could it be that the number of cases in Zambia are possibly higher? And could we be living with people who are infected with COVID-19, but we just don't know it?
Yes, thank you very much, Kamota. And to answer that question directly, yes. So the cases that we have here are actually much more than what is actually being reported, because our per capita testing is actually much lower compared to other countries.
Right.
So meaning that probably what we have is about maybe 10 to even 20 times more than what is actually being reported. And this is documented also in the number of BID cases that are actually testing positive. In fact, the Ministry of Health, through the Public Health Authority, they have actually commissioned a study in which they want to do a seroprevalence study. So that study will actually tell us the burden of the infections that we are actually having in the communities.
Right.
Yes.
So we do have possibly more numbers than we are reporting because of the limited per capita testing that we've carried out.
Yes.
So the whole aspect around asymptomatic people, other people will show symptoms, other people will not show any symptoms of having COVID-19.
Yes.
What role does one's immune system play with regard to whether you're asymptomatic or you have symptoms?
Yes, that's a very wonderful question. In fact, the immune system plays a double-edged sword.
Right.
So basically, the pathology or the disease process is driven by the immune system. So this is why, like in Western countries, we are actually seeing a lot more disease, because the individuals that are infected are responding aggressively. So the immune system is actually responding in a very aggressive way, and we call that inflammation, and it's the one that is causing a lot of tissue damage, and even those with underlying chronic conditions that are also of an inflammatory nature are having more severe disease. Okay. However, here, because we are bombarded by a lot of other infections, so you find that with COVID, the way we are responding, we are not responding in a very inflammatory way. And so you see that here in Africa, particularly even here in Zambia, most of the cases that we have are actually asymptomatic.
Right.
Yes. But however, we should know that in certain individuals, especially those with who may be immunocompromised or have other underlying conditions like hypertension, diabetes, even cancer patients, they may actually get severe disease, including also the elderly. And it's just that here we have a low population of the elderly.
Yes. So this is also why we possibly have slightly lower deaths.
Lower deaths.
Right.
Yes.
And generally around Africa, has one of the largest and the growing youth population when it comes to global numbers.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And so we talk about asymptomatic, and you talk about the inflammatory response. So is this inflammatory with regard to the immune system? This is something happening inside the body.
Yes.
Could you just expand on what exactly that is?
Yes. So what happens is our immune system is made up of cells, and then they produce various chemicals, mostly cytokines. We call them cytokines. And so inflammation is basically, in a lay perspective, is a mechanism in which our body fights any infection or tissue injury. It's like an army. Okay. So if your immune system is loaded and ready to fire. So you find that in certain conditions, that may cause what we call collateral damage, where it responds in a way that it's targeting the virus, but then the armaments that are produced are also causing injury to the normal cells and tissues. So there's some kind of balance in which the immune system should function. And so you find that it will tip on one side to protect you, but it can also tip towards actually harming the individual.
Right.
So it looks like for COVID, I know for other conditions it's different. It looks like our immune system is kind of conditioned not to cause harm. This is why it is more mild here. But if you look at in the Western countries...
Sorry, let me just get that correct. When you say that our immune system, we're looking at the standard African immune system, is not wired to harm.
For other conditions, it is. It's just that for COVID, in fact, for a lot of conditions, we are actually very disadvantaged. And this is kind of the first time that tables have turned, and as scientists, we still really can't understand what's going on, because the projections were actually that because of HIV, AIDS, and our healthcare systems and all these things,
it would be a slaughter.
Yes, that it would be a slaughter, but it is the opposite. I'm looking at the numbers here, like USA, they had 960 deaths just yesterday.
960 deaths.
Yes, Brazil had 1,200 in 24 hours. Yes. And when you look at the number of deaths we have here, you can't compare.
Right.
Yes.
Well, the actual reported ones are not even in the 50s yet.
So. No, about 40, is it 44?
Right.
Like deaths that we have.
Right.
And most of them are BID cases, meaning that they had other conditions, but then just tested positive. But,
so I am Dr. MUNSAKA. I like that you've taken the conversation towards the immune, and you've talked about the fact that here in Africa, our immune doesn't have an inflammatory reaction, and so we may see lower numbers. So now when it comes to, we know for a fact that there's no known cure for COVID just yet, but some people have recovered from COVID-19. So what exactly does recovering from COVID-19 mean, and how does a person who's recovered, how does their immune system work differently?
Yeah, that's another very good question, and which is not clearly answered, because once we answer that, then it will be easier for us to actually develop vaccines.
Right.
So, but what we have seen is that pretty much COVID is a mild illness on one side. But however, in other people, it's actually a very serious condition. So we as scientists world over, and including here, there are 2 studies actually where we'll be following up people who were infected or they tested positive and they have recovered. So blood will be taken, and we'll be measuring all these different immune cells, as well as the factors that are actually being produced.
Right.
There are also post-mortem studies that will be done to also look at those that have succumbed to the disease.
We're still understand
that. But preliminary results, like from other countries, especially in the developed world and in China, they've shown that the virus is actually attacking different parts of the body. It's not just in the respiratory system. The GI tract or the intestinal tract is also involved. Part of the blood clotting mechanisms. They are actually seeing that currently, like in the US, people in the 20s and 30-year-olds are dying from what we call coagulopathies, where the blood is actually clotting in different parts of the body.
This is after having
exposure,
had exposure to COVID-19.
Yeah.
And so it makes it, it sounds rather alarming to know that you may have COVID, you may recover, but you may find that you later down the line suffer from other things.
Yes.
That is correct.
Yes, that is correct.
So we definitely have a lot to learn about COVID itself. So I'm not quite sure if I've understood. Could you? So, what exactly does an immune system that recovers from COVID do? So, it may recover, but there's a but.
Yes, so what happens is people who are recovering are producing very high amounts of antibodies. So these are molecules that actually fight and neutralize the virus. This is why in other countries where they have a high number of people that are hospitalized, they are actually getting blood from people who are recovered. You spin it down so that you get that liquid part which has a lot of antibodies, and transfusing it into those people. But here we haven't reached that stage
level.
because we don't have that much
Capacity?
No. We don't have sick people, like people who are getting seriously ill, who
Right.
actually need that. I've actually already talked to my colleagues at the blood bank, and they say they are ready. We can do that.
Yes.
That's very easy.
Okay, that's encouraging to know
Yes,
that it's
yes.
something that we have the capacity to do. I think sometimes we are just in a state of woe to think if something happens, we won't be able to
That's
do what
easy.
we need to do. So that's
Yes.
fairly easy to
Yes.
do. So most cases have been asymptomatic. There is treatment. The body can fight, but
Yes.
the way that the body fights puts you in a compromised position for
Yes.
other things. So when it comes to, like, what you've just told me has almost instilled a bit of fear in me. But how do we go about sensitizing people to
Yes.
take care
Yes.
without making them terribly paranoid or fearful? Because
Yes.
now you're like, so maybe you may have had COVID, you're asymptomatic, it's out of your system, but you may then later down the line have other issues.
Yeah, that's another important question.
Right.
In fact, what is happening is that when COVID broke out, especially when the president announced these measures, there was that fear. Everyone stayed home. People were masking.
Yeah.
There was a little bit
People
of stigma
didn't want
and all
to,
that.
yeah.
So the moment cases started coming up, and there was more fear, and then the moment people were recovering, no deaths, only 1, 2 deaths, and our guard has gone down.
Right.
And if you look right now in the communities, if you move around, no one is masking.
Yes.
They are only masking when they are going into an
A
area,
store.
a store where it's a requirement.
That's
And the moment they walk in there, they actually remove their mask. So our guard has really gone down. And we need to sensitize people. And right now, it's not only the elderly, because I've told you about 20, 30-year-olds that are actually dying of these coagulopathies. And then the symptoms also, because this is asymptomatic, people are not showing with that normal flu-like cough. People actually have no symptoms, and then they will just collapse and die. So this is why even for these cases that are coming BID, we really need to study them.
to get to the bottom.
Yes, and I've been talking to my colleagues in pathology that we can write up, and we are in the process of writing up a protocol to actually do that.
Right.
Yes.
So it's a very busy time in the science community in Zambia right now. There's so much to learn. There's so much to do. So if you've just joined us, we are talking with Dr. SODY MUNSAKA, who is the acting dean of the School of Health Sciences at the University of Zambia, and he is also a virology and immunology specialist. And I'm very concerned about what you've shared, because a lot of us are just thinking of just the right now. If I have COVID, or if I've had it, it's past, it's gone. And now there's these other aspects of, so we should still protect ourselves regardless. And we talked about the fact that when the president had just started announcing, we had our guard up. And now, as time has gone, people are slowly starting to lose that social distancing protocol and that type of thing. Do you feel that, where do we draw a balance between information, not causing panic, as well as, you can almost become a bit desensitized when every day, it's like we had updates every day, and then it just becomes normal and you no longer feel concerned. So how can we strike a balance?
Yeah, definitely the where we are now is not a good place, where we've even lost track of when the updates are going to be. Like even myself, I depend on going on the internet and all that. So when we started, it was daily and all that, and some people.
But it was too
didn't like
much.
that.
It was becoming scary.
It was
Some
becoming-
people felt.
But for
Yeah.
people like me, it was like a routine, and we wanted these updates. Maybe they could have been shorter because there was so much maybe given out. But then later on, I think it became more interesting, and so I think the balance here is we need to be having at least twice
Twice.
a week. So like Monday, Friday, or
Start
Monday,
and
Wednesday.
end. Okay.
Yes, that would be very good, and then consistent, and then keeping them short, and then having technical people explain and answer questions.
Right.
Because sometimes when you have a 2-hour session and talking,
You lose people.
You lose people. So having technical people and answering, and then having lay people saying questions.
Right, and
Yes.
I like that you say that. So speaking of questions, we do have a text line. So if you'd like to send a question or add to the conversation that we're having regards to COVID-19 and the increased number of deaths in Zambia at the moment, you can send your message to 0976 547 599. I'll say that again, 0976 547 599. The number is at the bottom of the screen, and Dr. MUNSAKA will be happy to answer your questions. And speaking of fear and knowledge, in a recent publication titled Fears and Knowledge, Views of Susceptibility of COVID-19 Infection for People Living with HIV in Zambia, you mentioned that there's a growing fear of contracting coronavirus for people living with HIV in Zambia. So could you just speak about that particular finding and expand on it a little bit?
Yes, actually we did this study with my colleague Dr. Chitangala, who is in public health, and we did a phone survey, and this was very early during the COVID era, and there was a lot of fear, especially for the HIV, and this was the time when the media out there was actually projecting that there will be dead bodies on the street. So we interviewed people, and as you can see in that article, that a great deal of people had that fear and panic. So for me, I feel like that was good, because then the guard was very, very high. And then we were looking at the evidence from China, and then into Europe, and then you see the wave went to the US, and from the US, we were now thinking that it's coming here. And the projections were that during the code, it would actually peak.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the deaths have kind of peaked, but the infection rates are still, and it's the issue of testing. If we are doing more testing, the cases will actually be shooting up. Then the other issue I want to bring in is the issue of weather. Because when COVID started, it was winter in the northern hemisphere. And we are now in our winter, and we are still not seeing much in terms of the change. But if you look at the cases right now, they are in the summer in the US, and they are still going up. The deaths are going up. So which means that come the summer here, the cases and deaths are going to continue if we maintain this attitude among the public.
Of just only wearing a mask.
Not doing
Right.
things.
And with regard to the way that the public is taking it, Lusaka was the place where we first broke COVID, and we saw Nakonde also as well. How should other towns, how should other provinces behave right now? I recently was in Northern Province, and I was shocked at how you could tell the people who are from Lusaka because they have masks. You know, so how should people in other provinces behave? Right.
So they should emulate Lusaka, because what is happening is, you see what is happening in Western Province. People now are reporting cases. I was told, I come from Southern Province, I was also told that people are not wearing masks there because there is no COVID. So very soon it's going to actually spread from there. And the other thing I want also just to bring in is the issue of economics, the issue of lockdowns and all that.
Right.
So it looks like the world is being informed by economics, because if you look at the Western countries, the disease is surging, and yet we are seeing reopening. It's also the same here, where
We have,
actually we closed down with 0 cases. And now we have thousands and we are opening up. It's actually ironic. That's maybe another topic for another day.
No, we can have this conversation. It's important to look at it holistically, you know.
Yes,
So,
yes.
Go
So
on, please.
even here, what is happening is that we are more informed by economists than health experts. And this is why, again, I'm not trying to attack, but what I'm trying to tell you is that we actually had very good measures when we had low numbers, and then we have actually laxed. Yeah, and one thing that we are lucky is that we don't yet have what I call community spread. This disease is not yet probably like in markets and in shanty compounds.
Say that once more.
Community
You don't
spread.
feel that coronavirus?
We have community spread.
Okay.
What I mean is that if you look at the cases that are being tested, especially like the initial cases, they were all import cases.
Right.
Even the ones that are being tested, most of them you find Nakonde coming from the southern borders, it's borders,
towns.
and then immediate contacts.
Right.
What we call primary and secondary contacts. Yes. So where I was saying that we'll lose it if you now have like contact number 1, 2, 3, then you have
a branch off.
So it's like we only have the person bringing it, first and secondary contact.
Right.
So this is why the issue of contact tracing, and once you have numbers in the thousands, then contact tracing becomes actually impossible because of the huge resources that are required. And you see countries like the US, they've actually failed to do that.
To contact trace.
Yes.
Yeah. That's true. So you bring in the aspect of the socio-economic factors, and we have, world over, every government is saying this can't go on any further. We cannot afford to have our economies grind to a halt. Let's open up. Let's hope people do the right thing. Now, we had countries who put down more liberal lockdowns. For example, countries like Japan, South Korea, Belarus, Sweden, and they didn't experience such negative course of events unlike those who actually had lockdowns.
Yes.
So what scientifically may have happened in places that did not say stay home, or what happened?
Yes, so there were countries also like the Scandinavian countries. Also, they had that approach of what we call herd immunity. This is a concept where we allow the natural infection, like you allow nature to take its course.
Okay.
So, yeah, because there what they did was that because of the economic impact, say let's not do any restrictions that will impact on the community. I mean on the economy. Yes. So they did that, and surprisingly, they didn't have as much cases and deaths as countries like Italy and Spain that actually completely shut down.
Right.
And
Italy's deaths were very scary.
High, yes. So that's again another mystery that we don't know. The US also, after this wave, they thought that, in fact, there were seroprevalence studies that were showing that about 10 to 20% of the population was already infected. So they started reopening, hoping that there is what is called herd immunity, where those that are exposed or infected are not getting reinfected. They are actually not seeing this. And by the way, the other thing is I sit on the WHO expert panel that is actually looking at these issues of herd immunity and how we can actually safely reopen. And I've been having a series of high-level meetings at WHO level. And we've really pulled here and there to actually bring guidelines on this. And what is coming out is that we may not reach herd immunity early enough. So meaning that people who are recovering are still getting reinfected and may actually get more serious disease.
So you bring in now an interesting part of the conversation. I think we'll park the economics and the lockdowns for now. Reinfection.
Yes.
And so what then, well, when we think of coronavirus, or the layman in me is like it's a flu, and in my understanding is you can only get it once, and after that your body has developed a natural immune, and so every time you get something, it's a slightly different variant. So coronavirus reinfection, how, why, and what happens when now you're in your second phase of a new corona
infection.
Right.
Yes. So the early when you look at related viruses like influenza, flus, they mutate about every year. So this is the reason why every year you can be getting a flu. Right. Sometimes even within a year you find that there's one flu that will sweep through, and then once you recover, everyone can be sick. You've seen where you don't get it because you just recovered, okay? But then another one after a few months, it gets you. So the virus evolves. So when we look at coronaviruses, the first one, which was called SARS, right. It hasn't changed much. Then we had Mid-Eastern, which is called MERS. It hasn't changed much. Then we have SARS-CoV-2, this one now, the coronavirus. They've shown that it's not changing rapidly, but there are some small changes that are happening in this virus. And one of them is the issue of adaptation. This is why it's adapting from cold to hot. So this virus is becoming super fit. Yes, it's becoming very super fit. Then in terms of transmission, the earlier thoughts was that this is a droplet transmission. Now more evidence is coming that it's surviving longer in the air. So this is why WHO has just this weekend changed guidelines to airborne.
And so speaking of guidelines, initially there was a lot of confusion. Masks protect you, masks don't protect you. So will we be having this sort of dance with the virus with regard to what now becomes acceptable, what doesn't?
Yeah, so for droplet transmission, masks, even cloth masks, would actually protect you. But with this airborne transmission, it means that we may have to rethink that. But what I can say is that having a mask, any form of mask, is better
than no mask.
No mask.
Right, right.
Yes.
So if you've just joined us, we are talking to Dr. SODY MUNSAKA, who is the acting head of the School of Health Sciences at the University of Zambia. And we're talking about COVID-19 and also just looking deep into the conversation with regard to the number of deaths. We're looking at it also from an aspect of immune systems. So we had started the conversation, this particular part, we were looking at lockdowns, how some countries did have lockdowns, and you introduced a new term to me, which is herd immunity. Yes. So when you talk about herd immunity, it will take a bit of time for us to get there, where we have people who were infected, recovering, and so on. And you also talked about having dialogues with the World Health Organization with what guidelines should be put in place, or what, I guess, the new normal would look like with regard to opening up. Are you in a position to possibly share maybe one or two things that we would likely see, or we have begun seeing with regard to guidelines of how the world will now operate?
Yeah, so those guidelines will be coming out very slowly, and they are actually not yet out. And why this is actually taking long, it's because of the evolving science, because we are being informed by the science.
Right.
In fact, the working group that I'm on is looking at what we call, or there's a term, that's why I'm using this, called immunity passports.
Immunity passports.
Yes. So what it means is that, for instance, there was an initial thought that when people are exposed, that is, if they are infected, and you test them using antibody tests, and you find that they have antibodies against COVID, they would not get reinfected.
Okay.
So meaning that those people could be issued with some kind of a document or certification to move about
So that-
without these
a
restrictions.
travel pass.
It's a travel pass, but it can also be a pass like for you to go to ShopRite without masking or without doing
I
this,
see.
without doing
Without all that.
yeah.
That has okay.
Yeah. But that has not happened because we have documented scientific evidence that people are actually
Getting
reinfected.
reinfected. Right.
And the second infection may even cause more serious illness.
Damage.
Yes.
Okay. So.
So we are kind of going back and forth.
Right.
with that.
Okay. So it makes sense why one week for 2 weeks this is something that's shared, and the World Health Organization comes out to say, wait, we've learned this about it, and this is how you need to respond to the information that we have.
Yes.
And so you just gave a bit of a history with regard to influenza type of viruses, talking about SARS, talking about MERS, and now looking at the coronavirus. And you said there was a slight mutation in this one virus over the years. So is it possible for science to predict what possibly would be the next mutation of COVID?
Mutation.
Is it possible?
Well, people are doing what we call mathematical modeling, and I'm also involved in some of the studies, and we've modeled especially even SARS, and the work that I've been doing is actually on influenza viruses, and the prediction, in fact, of the next pandemic will come actually from an influenza virus, and an avian influenza virus. Avian as like a bird. Influenza,
a bird influenza.
Influenza virus. And the reason is that I think around 2005 we had an outbreak of avian flu. It's H5N1.
Yes, I remember
yes.
that one.
So that virus jumped actually from birds into humans. A few humans were actually infected, but it killed a lot of birds, and the people that were infected actually all died. But then the virus could not mutate in humans so that it can go from human to human transmission, what we call human to human transmission. The way viruses behave is that a lot of these are what we call zoonotic, they are in animals. So when they first jump to a human, there is no immune, because the immune system doesn't recognize them, so they become very lethal, they kill. So when the person dies, and hopefully if they are the only one infected, then the disease dies. But if they recover, the virus changes in a way, and then they start transmitting to another person.
And another person.
And then another person. So that's how a lot of these are caused. But the avian influenza, the bird flu, has not reached that. Yeah.
Okay.
And because of what is happening in China, the way poultry and pigs are
you
mixed,
bring me
and
into
all
the
those
next question.
things.
Why is China such a hot spot? It almost feels like
it's a cooking. It's actually a time bomb for viruses.
Is it the
way-
population? Is it the
Okay, it's a population, but the way their markets are. So, rule of thumb, even here in Zambia, we've seen now where everyone is doing a chicken run in the backyard and things like that. But there, they have a lot of animals in one place. Sometimes even one cage. You'll find
pigs,
pigs, ducks, and different types of birds, pangolins, and all that. Because even the SARS, these SARS viruses, we have them, and they are in bats. So when you keep bats and other animals, then the transmission goes into another animal. And then you kill, you butcher, you eat that animal.
without proper cooking?
Without proper cooking. So this is how these viruses are actually transmitted. And also breathing the air, there are these droplets, dust and all that.
So with the animals within that same space as human beings?
Even sleeping quarters, there they keep animals even in the bedroom. You find they'll have chickens and all that, and they're sleeping, and this is how even swine flu That is 2009 already. That's how swine flu actually started. It's actually from the pigs, and then it jumped into humans. In fact, it's the last pandemic that we actually had.
Right.
Yes.
So it's good to know that at least science sort of has a bit of a head start with regard to what could be the next avian type of pandemic. And it's very interesting to see. Well, you can't exactly predict a pandemic. You may say, okay, this is what we expect, but from what you're talking about, it seems like the way that mutations happen and the way viruses move, they're almost intelligent and they are very responsive to environment and that type of thing. So now getting into fatality of the coronavirus, do you feel that on a Zambian scale, we have understood how fatal it is, especially in a situation where we are not seeing the number of deaths like the US, who have 960 deaths in 24 hours. Have we fully grasped how fatal this thing is?
So we have not. And I'm answering this question from a lay perspective of the person on the street, how they would answer it. Why? Because they are not seeing the numbers of infections. They are not seeing the deaths. People are visiting my offices in UTH, and I walk around, I'm all gloved up, masked up and everything, and I see people working business as usual. Patients and people who come to see patients, they are not taking any kind of precautions. The reason why is because we have not seen a real pandemic. Our health systems have not in any way been overwhelmed. We are not seeing surges. And so this is why the normal person on the street thinks that this is a hoax.
Right.
We've even had high-level people saying that this is
people say
hoax.
there's no COVID in Zambia. Like I've had people say there's no COVID in Zambia.
Yeah.
There's no COVID in Zambia, despite what's happening.
Yeah. So I don't know how we can tell people that it is there. Sometimes.
Do we need a comparison? Or would you give a comparison with regard to fatality? How fatal is COVID if we are comparing it to another infectious disease? Would that help?
I think that's a very difficult question, because I think here especially here in Africa, we are more used to these infectious diseases. I think one of the diseases that we really understand is HIV/AIDS. Even if it takes long, but we see the progression. Before ART, people used to even you would see how people used to
wither away.
Yes. But now with COVID, because the symptoms, it's like a flu. You know, this is why even developed countries, even the politicians there, I think I can say about Trump. Just before coming here, I was watching, he has just landed in Florida, and he had no mask. Everyone around is masking.
I've actually never seen Donald Trump wearing a mask.
No.
Yeah.
No. I was just watching that about 20 minutes ago. He landed in Florida.
Right.
So it's starting from that level. And I think I like it that our political leaders here are leading by example. I think we see that most of our political leadership, they are actually all masked up, even when they go in public and all that. But the only thing I'm not seeing is that when they go around, there are a lot of people following, and they are all not masked up.
Right.
So they are actually putting our political leaders at risk. And probably some of them, this is how they got infected. But I would not want to have like our head of state or anyone get infected. And so they need to protect themselves. And here I'm talking about the people that protect them. They need to do much more.
Right.
They need to be protected.
To do crowd management. Because this is like going a bit off on a tangent, but this is, you can't have, would have a leadership situation if anyone, God forbid, got fatally ill and we lost someone.
So we need to protect them.
Right.
This
For
is why
continuity purposes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so if you've just joined us, we are having a conversation around COVID-19. We're looking at it with Dr. SODY MUNSAKA, who is the acting dean of the School of Health Sciences at the University of Zambia. If you'd like to ask a question to Dr. MUNSAKA, you can do that on our text line, which is 0976 547 599. We would love to hear from you. I'm KAMOTA MAYONDI, and we get right back into the conversation. So with regard to fatality, you've said it's difficult to give a comparison to just how fatal the COVID-19 is and looking at other infectious diseases. So then could we just get into aspects of the journal that you published? So in a recent publication that you had co-authored with the Pan-African Medical Journal on probable contributors to mild inflammatory responses of COVID-19, you found that the mechanism for the occurrence of mild to severe COVID-19 is related to individual immune, right? And so when we look at immune and HIV, we've had that particular discussion. Would we say, because you talked about here we're used to, what was the term that you used?
Like inflammation.
Yes, so this is why we are slightly built different. I don't know what the right term is. Yeah.
So basically, I'll go a little bit in the science. So in terms of infections, here in Africa, particularly here in Zambia, we have a lot of parasitic diseases like
the
malaria and the worms. So the way those diseases condition our immune system, they condition our immune system on another side. In fact, we call that Th2.
Okay.
I won't go into that, but I will just say another direction.
Right.
So
So sorry, before you go on, when we say here, it's not a black people thing. It's just if you've been in an environment that exposes you
to a lot of parasites.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make that
so
clear.
it has nothing to do
with race.
With race.
Okay.
So it's about environment. This is why, as an immunologist, I want kids to play out there in the mud, in the dirt, eat this. Sometimes you've seen a child would get dog poop and eat it and
be okay.
And be okay. Now, what that does is that it conditions your immune system. Our Western colleagues are in a clean environment, no playing in the dirt and all that. So they are like in a hygiene. So immunologically speaking, that hygiene, I'm using inverted commas, is not good for your immune system. Because when you get an infection, it responds very aggressively. And that aggressiveness is the one actually that causes damage to a lot of organs and tissues. So here, because of the exposure of, let me give you another example, though this is not very good. You've seen people who have mental illness who pick things, eat things and all that, they don't bath and things. You've seen that. Have you ever seen any one of those sick?
No.
Why?
Because
now
that I'm learned, they have built the immune. They're strong to take it.
They're taking it. So in a way, because of this bombardment of all these infections, worms, malaria, parasites, and all that, that is the conditioning that we actually have. Yeah, because let me bring you another argument we brought about the issue of race. If you look at the US, proportionately, black people and Hispanics are the high number of deaths from COVID, not the whites.
Yes, that is.
And initially when COVID broke out, the black people there were saying, even here they were saying that it's for the whites. And then they started dying, and their numbers, if you look proportionately, they are actually higher. So it's the conditioning of the immune system. So this is why that article is actually talking about parasites and things
Right.
like that.
Interesting.
Yes.
That is very interesting to learn. So if you have any questions for us, you can reach us via text on 0976 599 547, and the number appears on the bottom of your screen. You are watching Talk With, and we're talking with Dr. SODY MUNSAKA. And so we get now into the numbers. You had some interesting numbers to share. So what now are we sitting at globally, and what are the numbers looking like?
Yes. So I'm actually looking at the live data right now.
Right.
Updated 9:35 GMT, which is just 19:30
Right,
our
not too
time.
long ago.
So just a few minutes ago. So we have 12,415,000 cases.
Active.
No, this is the total
Okay.
cumulative.
Okay.
Yes. So the number of deaths is actually 557,000. These are the numbers of deaths.
Worldwide.
Yes, and 7 million have recovered. So meaning that the active cases currently is 4.6 million.
Wow. So
These are the active cases. And in terms of the daily numbers
Right.
that we are actually getting, we are actually reporting 200,000 cases like daily. This is where
on
we
a
are.
global scale.
Yes, and if you look at these curves, I wish the camera can pick this.
All right.
Let's see if
Is it possible to pick that up?
Yes. So the first one is actually showing, this is actually where we are.
Okay.
This
we
is
can
actually,
see that.
yes.
Uh-huh.
So you can see that it's actually going up.
Right.
Yes. And this one is actually the deaths. So you can see that around April, this is when we peaked, and we started going down in June, and then we've started going up and
again.
these are spikes.
So could this be reflection of as the world is opening up?
Yes. So we can see actually that here it's actually going to start going up
As we get further along into it.
So we are actually going to have another peak. But again, the country level data here, I can show you, like US has 3 million cases already. It's actually the highest. And they report like 61,000 on a daily basis.
That's a very...
Those are the numbers that we are getting.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so we have a text message, so we just get to our text message and let's see what this particular message says. What do you think is the way out of COVID-19? Will it be a treatment or a vaccine? Or maybe we will just have to learn how to live with it like other diseases such as HIV, malaria, and the like. That's from Nathan from Chilenge. Thank you so much for that question, Nathan.
Yes.
So what do you think the way out of COVID-19 will be, Dr. Munsaka?
Yes. Of course, number one is vaccine. I think once we have a vaccine, we'll be in a good position to eliminate this. Okay. Then, of course, the immediate thing is treatment to make sure that those that have the virus, especially those that are seriously ill, are actually treated. But what will control this pandemic is a vaccine. So let me put my foot down on the vaccine. Yes.
Right.
And it's the same applies with, say, HIV, malaria, TB. It's issues of vaccines. Yes, especially for COVID, because even issues of prevention, because of this discussion of airborne.
It's difficult.
It's difficult.
It's very difficult.
Yes.
So you have a seat at a very important table at the World Health Organization. So when it comes to things like vaccines, how long are we from seeing a vaccine being made available?
Actually, very soon, because early projections are that by September. And in fact, there's a gamble that some of the vaccines that are being tested, the manufacturing process has actually been started.
Okay.
So meaning that once the vaccine is proven, there will be probably 1 million doses already made. Of course, this is a huge investment because, for instance, if the ones that are being manufactured prove that they are not working, a lot of money would have been wasted. But this is why vaccines are expensive. And this is why I tell people that it's a league for big boys. Because I've always been asked to say, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I told them, I said, give me $1 billion.
And that's a lot.
Then yes, give me $1 billion.
Money.
Yes, give me $1 billion, a building, a lab, and all that, and get this, and then we participate into that. So for now, our contribution is as these vaccines are being tested, then we participate because then because science is collaborative. Europeans are working with Americans. No one is working in isolation. So we are also participating in that. We cannot go on our own as Zambia and say, we want to develop a vaccine.
Right.
No, it doesn't work like that. Yes.
Okay. And so as we wrap up the conversation, coronavirus seems to have overshadowed other general things, especially around the social and economic factors. So how do we find a balance of saying, you know, life must continue, but also we must stay safe. Also, there's this thing. How do we find a balance?
Yeah, so I think the balance, we found a balance and we've done very well, especially the way the Ministry of Health has handled this COVID. One of the things we know here in the country that in terms of disease and deaths, we have HIV, we have malaria, we have TB. So in terms of our care, I come from the lab side. We have not scaled down on HIV testing, on TB testing and all that. So even in terms of resource allocation, human capital as well as other logistical issues, we have made sure that these services continue to run. And I think the Ministry of Health has done very well that with COVID, they've created these other centers and additional resources, a lot of it that the public has actually donated to actually do that. So I think for now, we are at a very good balance.
We're still being mindful of the fact that this is happening, but other things continue to be faced by Zambians everywhere. On that note, you have been watching Talk with Dr. SODY MUNSAKA, who is the acting dean of the School of Health Sciences at the University of Zambia, and he is a biomedical specialist in virology and immunology. Dr. MUNSAKA, it was a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you so much for joining us on Talk with.
Thank you.
All right. To our viewers, you can catch me next Friday. I'm KAMOTA MAYONDI saying good night and God bless.